Welcome to Lincoln Fire and Rescue. I'm your host, Dale Johnson. Post-traumatic stress disorder has our attention today, and rightfully so. Firefighters experience PTSD at rates similar to what is seen among combat veterans. According to a report by the International Association of Firefighters, almost 20% of firefighters and paramedics report PTSD. That's 1 out of every 5. The general population's rate of PTSD is 3.5%. Firefighters are twice as likely to take their own life than die in the line of duty, and 10 times more likely to commit suicide than the general public. With that as the foundation, I want to introduce Brent Jones. Brent, thank you very much for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
Brent is in for this conversation today along with Nancy Christ from Lincoln Fire and Rescue, and this is the subject PTSD today. Brent's story begins with recognizing he needed help and the journey to get that help. So thank you very much for coming in. I want you to tell your story. Nancy, let's start with an overview. I mentioned a little bit about the issues of PTSD in the profession of firefighting.
We've known that it exists for several years, but it's one of those things that just quietly sits dormant, and we don't know how to address it. It seems too big. About 5 years ago, we had a couple of deaths by suicide, and then we've had another one since then. After that, we decided, gosh, we've got to do some education. We've got to wrap ourselves around this. So we went to a peer assessment type training just to learn how to address our peers that are struggling. And since then have developed a program, and we're able to put several firefighters across the job that have some of this training that can basically be that point of contact for the rest of our folks. They make that contact. We're able to hopefully get them placed into some sort of counseling or in some instances to intervene and get them immediate help if they're looking at suicidal ideation.
Brent, how long have you been a firefighter paramedic?
With the City of Lincoln since 2011. I've been involved in fire and EMS for about 20 years between volunteer and part-time employment, but full-time with the City of Lincoln since 2011.
And what were the signs of PTSD for you?
Well, unfortunately, there was a ton of them that I didn't see. So it kind of started with a flat affect. I quit caring about everything. Like for me, it was, I used to enjoy things like yard work and spending time with family, and all those things became tedious. Getting up and going to work became tedious. And I didn't see it. I didn't see that it was happening to me. I guess people around me did, but nobody really wanted to say anything to me. I became irritable. I started drinking a lot. I've always been a social drinker my entire life, but I started really drinking. Like I'd get off shift in the morning and I'd have a drink on the drive home.
How did it come on? How many years into your career did it start, and how did it come on?
I think it's been compiling since I started. I mean, the first call I ever went on in the fire and EMS was a bad traffic accident. And it didn't affect me. When I left there, I was like, wow, that was, kind of cool. Like, that's how I kind of dealt with it. Like, oh, as tragic as it was. And I thought I was dealing with it by talking to friends, that were also in the fire service. We'd be like, oh yeah, did you see that? Did you see this? And that's how I thought I was dealing with it. And I thought I was putting it where it was supposed to go. And then I had a call that was particularly hit close to home. Some teenage girls were in a tragic accident. And I didn't deal with it, and I didn't think anything of it, and it didn't bother me. And then as the anniversary of that call would come around, it would bother me, and then I would get over it. Well, then it started every time I would drive by that spot. Then it started bothering me, and then it started coming to me in dreams. And then it was naps. I would be waking up with a flashback. But I didn't put two and two together that was the reason for it. I was just like, oh, I don't know why this is going on. So to deal with that, I just would drink. like at night to go to sleep, I would drink because it would help me sleep, and I would sleep through the night. Now, how well was I sleeping when I was doing that? Probably not well at all. So I did that for probably a year and a half, like solid, not sleeping, not liking to come to work.
Sleep is such an important part of a firefighter paramedic's job.
It really is. And when I was at home, not on shift, it was easy because I could drink to go to sleep. Now I'm at work, I can't drink. So I'd lay in bed a lot at work at night and just not sleep. I'd toss and turn and sleep for an hour or two. So then I'd go home and want to sleep, so I'd have a drink to sleep. And it just kind of started compiling. Like, my marriage started, suffering from it. I didn't care about anything. I didn't want to, my kids annoyed me when they would talk to me. My wife annoyed me. Nothing made me happy. Nothing. So then, I stepped outside of my marriage because I was looking for something to make me happy. And that maybe made me a little happy, but that became risky behavior. And that's where I kind of get a little bit of a rush from it, like, oh, hey, that was great. So then I just started doing things like more and more like drinking and driving that I knew better. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. But it just didn't matter. I didn't care. But I wasn't seeing any of this. I didn't see any of this. This was just happening. Like, it was steamrolling, and I didn't know what was going on. And then it would come to the point where I'd be at work and we'd catch a fire alarm, like a confirmed structure fire. And I would think, maybe today the building will collapse on me, and then I'll just be done with this. Like, it just, I was so tired. I didn't want to go anymore. I just wanted to sleep. Just wanted to be free of what was in my head.
Did you ever think of changing professions?
I didn't, because ever since I was 3, I wanted to be a firefighter. 3 years old. I never wanted to do anything else in my entire life. This is it. And I didn't even think about it at the time, like, hey, this is probably not a good thought process. And I've lost friends. Like, I've had 5 people that I know personally in the fire service that have committed suicide. But to me, that wasn't a suicidal thought. Like, it wasn't suicidal. I was just like, oh, this building will come down on me. I'll be a hero, and I'll be free of my head. And it's a bad place to live. So I just continued on like that for, it was a good year and a half. And I went to a conference, Firehouse World. I like to go to conferences, I like to learn. And we were out there, and like the last day we were getting ready to leave, like the conference was ending, and there was one particular course session that I wanted to sit through. It was called Taboo Things We Don't Talk About in the Fire Service. So I sit through this class, and we're just at the last segment, and this PTSD slide pops up on the screen, and I was reading like he had like 10 bullet points on there, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that's me, and that's me, and that's me. And I was like, oh, this is not good.
That's you.
Yeah, like the light bulb came on. Like, it just popped onto my head, and I was like, I need to do something about this. Like, I can't continue on down this path because it's going to kill me.
Knowing firefighters the way I do over the years, had you been injured, let's say you tweaked your ankle, let's say you'd thrown a shoulder or something, you probably would have called yourself off duty not to jeopardize your fellow firefighters. But yet, because it's internal, because you can't see the physical weakness of it, you stayed on duty.
Absolutely. And that was dangerous for everybody. For me, for my coworkers, for everybody involved. So as soon as I got back from this conference, I was on shift like the very next day when I came back, and everything was just spinning in my head. I hadn't slept, and I'm just like, this is bad. So I reached out to one of our internal resource officers, which was before we had our peer counselors that have been through the IAFF's peer counseling process. And I reached out to one of them. I was like, hey, I need some help. And he was like, oh, what? So immediately, fortunately, the city has something in place for that. They sent me to EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program. And so I went down, like, on duty. They were like, go down, talk to somebody, let's get you squared away. So immediately when I get there, and the first time, as soon as I talk to this guy, his immediate thing is he's like, well, you need to get help for your drinking. And I'm like, I don't have a drinking problem. I've got a mental health problem. I need my head sorted out. I don't have an alcohol problem. No, did I have an alcohol problem? Yeah, because I was drinking every day, but I was drinking to get away from myself, to get away from reality. So, when I left there, I was kind of discouraged because I was like, well, that's not helpful. They just want to put me into a rehab and deal with a problem that I know isn't a problem. So I follow the International Association of Firefighters on Twitter, and when I got back to work, I got a tweet about the Center of Excellence, which is fortunately something that our union has been gracious enough to get started. So a tweet came across about this, and I was like, oh, it was about PTSD and about treatment for PTSD, and I was like, well, I guess I was supposed to get that tweet today, wasn't I? So I made a call and kind of got the ball rolling and was the first firefighter from the International Association of Firefighters to go to the Center of Excellence for treatment.
In Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
In Upper Marlboro, Maryland. The very first one in the country. So I don't know if that makes me the most screwed up fireman in the country or if...
well, it makes you the smartest firefighter.
Or does it make me the smartest firefighter in the country? And it was a hard pill to swallow because I'm a alpha male of alpha males, I demand attention when I walk into a room, like as Nancy can probably tell you. I like attention. And to me, showing weakness is not good. And I felt very vulnerable at the time. But I will tell you that everybody in the organization that I work for, including the fire chief and the union president, had nothing but my back the entire time.
That has to be the case, Nancy, doesn't it?
Has to be.
For it to work.
Yes. All the cogs have to be in place. And the fact that Brent initially reached out to an internal resource officer is huge too, because now we have some better things in place that are firefighter specific, that are specific to trauma treatment and those co-occurring addictions. And like Brent said, his alcoholism was not in the forefront. His alcoholism was a co-occurring addiction that was second to the PTSD.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned the injuries. If a firefighter puts in a claim for an injury that is covered under union policy, PTSD, I understand, is not covered?
Correct.
As an on-the-job injury?
That's right. So we are in the process of changing that. There is actually legislature that says that it is related to the job. However, we have been unable to successmakely get that coverage. So that's something that we're working on, that we hope that our lawmakers will continue to look at and be serious about accepting that as an on-the-job injury, because it is in fact an on-the-job injury.
Because it could be argued that had you not been a firefighter paramedic, you would not have PTSD.
Right. Yep, agreed. And I know that the fire chief and the union president and myself even went to the city before I left for Maryland, and the fire chief basically demanded to the city personnel that this is an injury. He said the same exact thing. If Brent had injured his knee, you guys wouldn't even be balking at paying for his treatment, but he's suffering a mental injury, and nobody wants to really claim it. Nobody wants to do anything about it.
Do you get over PTSD? Is it cured?
It's not cured, but I have a set of tools that
Okay.
that I've learned when I went to Maryland, how to deal with it. I still see a counselor once a month. Just kind of unload, just put things where they're supposed to be. It was kind of described to me, and firefighters like to eat all the time. So it's kind of described to me like when you're not dealing with your issues of traumatic stress, it's like a pancake and you're pouring syrup on it. So if you're not dealing with the issues, that syrup's just running off the pancake onto the plate, not going where it's supposed to be. Well, it should be a waffle. When you pour syrup on a waffle, everything goes in its hole where it's supposed to go. That's how it was put. So I was just pouring syrup on, and it's just running off. And now that I'm pouring syrup on, it's going in the holes. It makes life a whole lot easier to deal with.
Had I known you before you took treatment, what would you be like sitting here with me right now?
I'm going to tell you, I didn't have very many friends. I was growly, rude. I mean, just not really a pleasant person. honestly. I mean, it had come to that. Like, I was just kind of mean almost.
How's life now?
I'm living my best life. Like, every day. I have every day I get up, I get to go to work. I don't have to go to work, I get to go to work. I have the privilege of going to work. And it's every day. It's like, if I'm tired, even if I didn't sleep well the night before, for whatever reason, I get to go to work. I get up and I put my clothes on, I drive to work, and I'm happy to be there.
Does this ever come up with your fellow firefighter paramedics?
Yes.
Do you bring it up? Do they bring it up somewhere in conversation?
Yes.
That's important.
Very important. And I'm kind of trying to champion that cause. I've made it known that I'm not afraid to talk about this. I don't mind to tell my story. Anybody? I did a little segment for our recruit class, our new recruits, that Nancy shows to our recruit classes about mental health and awareness. Basically told my story and said, if you think you have a problem, you probably do have a problem. I've also raised the awareness with my family to keep an eye on me. Like, if I'm doing something that doesn't seem right, call me on it.
You give them license to be able to point that out.
And my adult children are very, very in tune to this. Like, if I do something that's out of character for me, if I'm having a bad day, everybody has bad days. If I'm crabby, my daughters will say, "Hey, is everything okay? Are you doing okay?" Like, yeah, I'm doing great.
Nancy, how long ago did you say this was implemented, this new understanding in LFR?
Approximately 4 years ago, we started doing just mental health education and just raising awareness of signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation and depression, and the comorbidities of PTSD. And I've had the opportunity to educate the 300 firefighters we have about every 18 months. So Brent did this segment for me in the last class we taught, and I continue to teach that class to, like Brent said, our new recruits. But everybody in the department has received that. And every time I teach this class, every time it gets me. It is so emotional. It's so incredible. I couldn't be more proud of this guy for having the ability and willingness to come forward with a story, because what his story is going to do is peel away some of those layers and allow other people to say, "Hey man, I am feeling a little bit different. There's places I can go. The Center of Excellence. I can reach out to an internal resource officer or a peer support person and just say, hey, I need some resources."
Yeah, the reason I was asking, I wondered if there was momentum that's required in something like this. Somebody tells somebody else, somebody gets help.
I think so. And the way that we can measure that momentum is that after the first class, we had more contacts to our EAP. Yeah. People just going, "Hey, you know what, I just want to talk some things out." And then the next year we taught it, again, that was compounded. So I just think that by having casual conversation about a very serious issue just continues to raise more awareness, and people become more introspective, and they're willing to go, that's me. I'm gonna pursue this. So.
Well, from one alpha male to another. Nice job.
Thank you.
Nancy, you're in that alpha category too. You're a firefighter, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
You have to have some of that going. Brent, thank you very much
it's my
for coming
pleasure.
in.
It's my pleasure.
Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Nancy, thanks for coming in.
Always.
And thanks everybody for joining us today on Lincoln Fire and Rescue.
And now to that incredible rescue, all thanks to a very smart app for your smartphone. A Washington State man springing into action. We got a message.
Pulse Point is active in Lincoln and free in the App Store. Download it today. You could be the one.